Rumors are often never the truth. Each time it's told, it's changed to interest you.
Thank you for clicking on this video. I'm Brooke Makenna, but today we are going to be talking about Jeannette DePalma. Now, her sudden death would be horrific enough, but she also had a twist in her story. One word: sacrifice. I am doing Suspect Summer all summer, posting so much content like this, so if you guys enjoy it, I would love for you to subscribe and come back and see it, and please thumbs up just to make me smile. And let's get back to the story. So Jeannette DePalma was a 16-year-old girl attending Jonathan Dayton High School. She worked at a little clothing store called Seal Fawns, and she was just really a regular teenage girl. Her family was very religious, so they kind of forced her to go to church. She was a pretty religious girl herself, but her friends did say she kind of had a little more of a wild side, but really, what teenager doesn't? But overall, she really just did normal teenage things. She worked, she went to school, she hung out with friends. But on August 7th of 1972, it was a regular day. She had gone to school, it was a Monday. She came home and then she told her mom she was going to go see a friend. She would need to take the train to go see this friend, and her mom really thought nothing of it until she didn't come home that evening. As it was getting later and later and Jeannette was still not home, her mom decided to call the police, and they found that Jeannette never even made it to her friend's house that night. At first, the police, they think many times, that she was just a simple runaway, like all teenagers do. They just run away is what they always think, but they didn't really want to do much. And so she was a missing person for 6 weeks. And eventually they began to do the searches. They were looking through woods, through areas around Springfield, New Jersey, and couldn't find anything. They could not find Jeannette. But on September 19th, 6 weeks after Jeannette had gone missing, a dog ran up to its owner with a right arm and hand in its mouth. It was badly decomposed, and he had just come from the woods right outside its owner's home. So this owner obviously called the police, and the police came to search the area. So this search led them straight to a ridge in the area called the Devil's Teeth. And that's where they found her body, face down. And upon further investigation, her clothing and her remains didn't show any signs of knife strikes, of bullet wounds, of anything. And there was no drugs found around or in the body. The only thing that was unusual was that there was a high amount of lead in her system. Now, apparently where this ridge is, it's really hard to get on by foot, and eventually, after seeing the crime scene, they had to bring a fire truck, back it up to the scene, and basically lift her body up and out of this ridge. When the coroner finally got her, he basically said that he couldn't find any cause of death. He said it was possible strangulation, but didn't really say much more than that. The official cause of death is unknown. But regardless, this death was now being treated as an unsolved homicide. Now, although not many people got to see the actual crime scene, a few in the local area did, and this is what led to many rumors being spread, because the police were very hush-hush about this entire crime scene, this entire case really. And so with them being silent and the public spreading rumors, of course the rumors just flourished even more and began to almost take over the entire town. And these weren't just simple, carefree rumors. They were dark. And most of them were about the actual crime scene itself. There are many different accounts of what people saw. Nobody can really agree on anything, but the most common account was that she was found inside of a coffin-like structure made of branches and sticks. It was just kind of like a coffin around her body with crosses made with sticks around her body. Some also said they saw dead animals hanging from trees, but some said that it looked pretty normal to them. But of course, the rumors of the coffin, and the crosses, and the dead animals, those are the ones that went public. And that's when the rumors of black magic and some sort of satanic cult were formed around Jeannette's death. One of the biggest being that it was done by a coven of teenage witches that were in the area who wanted to abduct and kill a child. Now, because of these rumors, the entire area was terrified. Everyone was so terrified they didn't really want to speak about it much. And the fact that there was no cause of death on Jeannette's body that was found made it even more terrifying for them, because nobody was talking about it, including the police. So they were left to assume the worst. Now, the Salem witch trials happened about 300 years prior to this. 20 people were hung, and I'm sure many more during this time, but I think people were still a little spooked by that. And back then, some Christians believed that the devil could give certain people power to harm people in return for their loyalty, and they would be called witches. And in Salem, actually, one of the minister's daughters began throwing fits and contorting in different ways and not sounding like herself, and then many more people started having the same symptoms, young girls. And one young girl even said, "The devil come to me and bid me serve him." And so this unleashed a paranoia and led to many, many, many executions. And so even though it was 300 years prior, I think it was just kind of, people were still very, very scared and weren't sure how to handle it at all. And so people really stopped talking about it. In fact, in 2 weeks, nobody was really talking about the case at all, and the police were doing things kind of behind the scenes at this point. They actually investigated a man who was a homeless man in the area living in those very woods where Jeannette's body was found. His name was Red, that's what he went by, and he was seen fleeing from the scene. A tip got called in that they saw this man fleeing from those woods. And so when they finally tracked him down and interrogated him, they found that he wasn't involved at all, apparently. And so they let him go. But after that, he was never seen in the area again. Now, while investigators tried to wade through the inconsistent stories about Jeannette from her family and friends, and her family's very private nature, as well as the very little leads that they had, the newspapers were brewing up an entire story of their own based on nothing but rumors and opinions, really. So only 2 weeks after they discovered her body, the newspapers Star-Ledger and New York Daily News actually reported on her murder, confirming that her death was from an occult satanic group. It was actually a coven of witches in the Watchung Reservation, which was nearby, and that it was a sacrifice. And one even cited the local Reverend James Tate, who said that this was true. But the police had really said nothing, and now the people who were still had the, I was going to say balls, but like those who still had the courage to talk about it now were completely silenced, because it was apparently confirmed in the newspapers, yet it really wasn't. But the leads quickly dried up, and when people stopped talking about it, would stop coming forward with tips, the case just kind of went cold. Although it is still actively open to this day, there was nothing more to really go on. And for 20 years it sat really with no answers, until a man named Mark Morin, and he was a writer for a magazine called Weird New Jersey, Weird NJ, actually decided to start researching this case. He wanted to write an article about it, and so he really dug in deep. What he found was that most of the documents from this case were lost or destroyed, and he really had to start from scratch as far as this entire case, just like a police would have to do. He had to go back to the very basics and kind of work his way from there. But these people were still scared 20 years later when Mark asked them for interviews or just anything about what had happened back then, anything they remembered. None of them wanted to be named. They wanted to have different names or just not be named at all, be anonymous. And so that's what he had to do, and not many people would even come forward for that. And the police department said that the documents were lost in a flood, they weren't destroyed, but even the police that were helping him with the information didn't want to be named either. So Mark went ahead and published the article with the information that he had kind of dug up himself. Not much information, but he published it anyway. And that is when more tips began coming in from people that kind of were shocked by the article. They all came in blank white envelopes with no return address, and all were anonymous. Some were handwritten, some were typed, but none of them had a name to it. I mean, some talked about Jeannette before the murder and just how she was a regular girl. Some talked about proof that there was a cult in the area the entire time, and some talked about a possible police cover-up in this entire thing. But suddenly he had all of this new information that he could not get before. Actually, the daughter of a woman who had worked with Jeannette at the clothing store that she had worked at came forward in a letter saying, "My mom's brother, who was a cop at the time, warned my mother about going to that area again, and that they found arrows carved into trees showing the way to the body. That dead animals were hung there and also at the Witchung Reservation shortly after, which was a known satanic site." Another letter that came in said that 2 years prior, he lived in the next town over, but 2 years prior, he had heard in school of a rumor about a cult actually being formed, and that they were going to sacrifice kids at Halloween by either poisoning them or just killing them. Another letter said that they cannot forget the weird things that happened in this town all the time before and after Jeannette's murder, and that it would make sense that the Springfield people, the police, would want to kind of cover up this murder because of the reputation in the town. They wanted to keep it a good reputation for people coming in, so they didn't want to tarnish that by saying cults and witches lived in the area. And actually, this letter also said that he had witnessed a sacrifice when he was younger, or this person had when he was younger, and reported it, and it was never talked about after that. It was never reported in the newspaper. Nobody else ever heard of it, but he knows, or they know, what they saw. Because of this new information and the bizarre elements of this story, Mark Moran teamed up with a co-worker named Jesse Pollack, and they decided to write a book called Death on Devil's Teeth. And they went in deep with the researching, where they soon discovered the possible connection to more murders. They received a tip from a relative of another woman who had been murdered that was 16 minutes away, the same month and the same year and the same MO as Jeannette. Her name was Joan Kramer. She was found a few weeks after Jeannette, strangled and face down in a wooded area. Now that spiraled into looking at the murders of Mary Ann Pryor and Lorraine Kelly that happened 2 years after Jeannette's murder. They were also found in New Jersey 5 days after they disappeared in a wooded area, face down. They looked to be sexually assaulted and beaten and strangled. Now this was only an hour away from where Jeannette's body was found. And the investigators in Mary and Lorraine's case actually just said that probably picked them up, was bad choice on their part, and really didn't want to investigate much more into that, and didn't. And Mary's sister actually said she would have never hitchhiked. That's just not her personality, and she would have never done that. But still, they wouldn't really do much, and the case went unsolved. Now, looking into all of that, Jesse and Mark had a new theory on Jeannette's murder, that possibly this was a serial killer, and nobody ever thought to look at it because they were too worried about it having to do with witches. Not only were these 4 girls all not buried, all left in wooded areas, and all around the same area, they all looked the same as well. I mean, this possible serial killer could have had a type. Very young, attractive brunettes with long shoulder-length hair. It was all straight, it was all parted down the middle. They were all between the ages of 16 and 24. They were all very thin, they were Caucasian, and they were all found face down in a wooded area. Now, instead of it being witches or anything like that, it could have been his ritual, just what he wanted to do as far as how he laid them out and how he arranged them, or how this person arranged them. And narcissism is a huge thing found in serial killers, and the fact that the bodies were left unburied, just left out in the open, means that if it was a serial killer, they wanted the bodies to be found because they were proud of what they had done. But back then, serial killer wasn't even a coined name yet. They went by mass murderers, and so nobody really even thought of a serial killer. And even though it happened in the same area, it was back in the 1970s. So the police departments weren't as connected as they are today, and something that happened, a few miles away, the people in the next town over sometimes did not know about at all. You have to remember that most people weren't as connected back then the way we are now with the internet and with phones. So really putting everything together wasn't an option unless you really, really, really looked into it. Which obviously in Jeannette's case, they didn't, because they were scared out of their minds. It's also theorized that if this was just a random murder or a serial killer, that it was staged to look like a sacrifice, because they knew of the cults in the area and the witches in the area and all of the rumors going around, and they knew that nobody would really look into it if they thought that that's what it was, so they would be safe from being caught. But some also thought that it was possibly the killer's MO because of his family relations to the coven of witches. A man named John List lived 2 miles away from where Jeannette's body was found, and 9 months before her murder, he had actually shot and killed his entire family in their mansion and arranged them in the ballroom, and then vanished and was gone for 18 years, had just completely disappeared. The reason he did this was because they were deeply in debt and about to be very poor, and he thought his family would rather be dead than be publicly shamed for being poor. So he killed them all. And then it was found that his daughter, who was the same age as Jeannette that he had killed, was supposedly in a cult herself and claimed to be a witch. And I've read stuff that says that he vanished for 18 years, but I couldn't find when he came back or when they found him or if they ever questioned him. So that's just a scary option, but if they did find him, I really hope they did investigate him, because that is a very strong suspect in this case, in my eyes. But some still believe this was just a sacrifice that happened in the area by the Coven of Witches, and that is that. But some police officers who are helping Mark and Jesse with this book have said that nothing really seemed out of the ordinary to them at the crime scene. One of them said that he didn't see anything out of the ordinary at all, and another said that it was kind of weird, but not really, and he actually said that it more looked like a halo of stones above her head and like a cross with branches, kind of like a makeshift grave, something like in her honor, like almost empathetic that somebody had put there. But still, nobody knows what the true story is, what happened to Jeannette DePalma. Nobody knows anything because they were too scared to look into it, and that just makes me so incredibly sad. Mark and Jesse are doing an excellent job and have done an excellent job on this book, The Death on Devil's Teeth, which I would really recommend. I'll link down below. And they have really investigated far more than the investigators did, because they're not afraid to do so. I think that there are so many different ways you could look at this murder, and not all of them are satanic. Do you think that this was a serial killer? Do you think that this was a random murder? Or do you think that this was a sacrifice? I just think that rumors can take things and make them so much harder to find the truth and to get things done. I think rumors are stupid and petty and just ridiculous. But unfortunately, they couldn't ask Jeannette because she had her life ended far too quickly. So let me know down below what you guys think about Jeannette's case. What do you think really happened? But make sure to subscribe if you like these videos, because I'm doing Suspect Summer all summer long. Thumbs up if you want to make me smile. And I will let you guys go. Bye.
Are we more scared of a darker being, or what others think and how we're being seen?